Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. For the first time in a month, I am joined by JP Mason. You have been on the show, as have I, but our paths have not crossed in a month. 23rd of July, JP, the last time you and me were on this, before we'd kicked a ball this pre-season.
Must have been, no, June, you mean?
June the 23rd, yes.
You said July.
I'm getting ahead of myself. There's
been a lot happening, I suppose, in the world of Celtic.
Plenty for us to catch up on. But before we do that, JP, you're on Twitter, aren't you?
Aye.
And you're a real person, because I've met you. I know that you are the real deal, right? Well, we've met quite a few times, actually. And some people might not believe this. We actually went to a Celtic game together on one occasion.
In the pre-COVID world.
We did. But Celtic Twitter's an interesting place. And listen, man, I'm not going to labour this, but yesterday I think it peaked. Celtic Twitter was trending on Twitter.
It's a riot. I mean, I still can't quite believe it, to be honest. Like, I was aware of that person. I didn't follow her, him, it. I have no idea what is going on there if people are assuming identities. So I wasn't aware of the minutiae of what she did, but apparently it was pretty elaborate over the last year in terms of revealing information about personal stuff, quite close to the bone personal stuff as well. And
it
was quite an elaborate ruse to continue that for such a period of time. But
what gets me, JP, right, is I've barely got time to do real life stuff in my real account. Imagine having a fake account and for months creating this false persona. I find it incredible that anybody's got the time to do that, first and foremost. But fair play to the couple of investigators who blew it wide open yesterday, and then obviously that resulted in...
What happened? It was
yeah.
Right.
So
Columbos.
There was a couple of Columbos. In fact, I think there were more Miss Marples, right? And they figured out that another page was a fake, and it was after they blew the lid off of that this one you're referring to came out and said, "Oh, by the way, I've been catfishing yous and all this kind of stuff." I didn't even know what that meant, and I mean that, by the way. So there we go. A wee bit lighthearted to start off today's show. I was watching the game, as most of us were, last night. JP, we'd done the match day bulletin solo, and it works pretty well because everybody's got plenty to talk about before the game with a lineup, after the game with the first stroke second half drop off, etc. So there's plenty to discuss. But what I found really interesting, and I'll read out the quote. This was on the post match from Ange. "The point of the exercise now is not to win games of football. The point of the exercise is to prepare a team to win games of football." And I think after last night's game and after the Blackburn game, that was kind of my thought process. I want Celtic to win every game. And I love that old quote that Celtic don't play friendlies. But let's put it into perspective. We're preparing for the 31st of July here. So I'm not too concerned about some of the negatives that have been raised, although we will discuss them. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think if you contrast and compare the two results against English opposition a year apart, so West Ham United, when they absolutely blew us away, we could clearly see that there was a lot of work to be done. Whereas first half against Blackburn, we were very comfortable, played well, and then obviously the changes, the inevitable changes in a friendly upset the rhythm a bit, and they pulled a couple of goals back, and obviously it definitely meant a lot to their travel and support. But I mean, I would never get carried away if we'd beaten Blackburn if we'd absolutely scudded them or something like that. I would never be like, oh, well, we're world beaters because we beat Blackburn in a friendly. And, likewise last night, we went 2-0 up and looked good for the two goals as well. Brilliant goals. Both of them really, really great.
So technical.
I mean, it was not surprised. We shouldn't be surprised, but everybody's spoken about the Japanese players having a pre-season now and being able to attack a season with, without the rigours of having already played a season. And if that's a sort of sample size of what they can what they can do, then it's something to look forward to.
It definitely is, and it's one of the things I've taken a note of is what I call the version 2 of a player like Reo Hatate or Daisen Maeda, and I think there's a few others, even Matt O'Reilly, JP, who, you know, he came in late. It's maybe taken him time, although it didn't look like it did, to adapt to the tempo and the style, etc. of Ange's play. But what we'll certainly see this season is the real deal for each of those players. And I think we've seen glimpses of that. I'll start off, I think, by talking about Reo Hatate, because I think this pre-season, although we've already just said there we can't take things too seriously, obviously we've now seen 5 games, so we're going to talk about them. I think Hatate's already looked fitter, sharper, and far more clinical. I mean, that finish last night was astonishing.
Yeah, it was. As was his pass for Maeda's goal. I mean, it you know, took it on the turn and then just perfectly weighted pass. You know, it was like a dream pass for a striker to get that. You know, it's Maeda couldn't really miss it, to be fair. But yeah, I think a lot of people were quite concerned that Hatate didn't feature in the first 3 games. He wasn't he wasn't playing, was he? So I think people were concerned that there was maybe an injury there. But then he appeared at the training day on Monday, didn't he? And then that was kind of I'm coming back. Did he play on the weekend?
He didn't. Because Ange had said he came away with 2 things. He spoke about Hatate and Giakoumakis, who were both missing, and he obviously explained Giakoumakis had just had a kid, but he had sent him a personal trainer because he wasn't getting away with that. And then, tongue in cheek, and then Hatate had a bug, so he said he could have either risked them against Blackburn or hammered them on the running track. So they decided to hammer him on the running track. So cheers for that, boss. But another thing I noticed about Hatate, obviously, was the gum shield, and we were talking about it last night, probably because we were talking about a cult icon in Artur Boruc. And I went back, and I do this, JP, because although we were rubbish, I enjoyed my time travelling through to Glasgow on my own, on supporters buses and watching Celtic in the early 90s. I know, maybe I'm just a masochist, I'm not sure. But I remember Jerry Craney used to wear a gum shield as well. So we brought up Jerry Craney. Can you remember that?
Not really, no. I mean, I do remember Jerry Craney playing for Celtic, but I don't remember the gum shield. Was it a clear gum shield, or was it? It was clear, yeah. I mean, it's only a matter of time before, you know, players are wearing them and there's a sponsor on them, you know what I mean? But Jerry Craney used to wear a gum shield, and we've spoken about Craney so many times on this podcast because he was one of the guys during a really, really poor and dark period of the club's history who I feel a bit sorry for, to be honest with you, because I think I've got this kind of theory on Celtic, JP, that if you go through, Celtic were always a kind of homegrown club. We always reared players. We brought them through the ranks, and inevitably we would sell them on. So there was a whole group of players we sold on in the 50s. Bobby Collins we sold in the 1950s, and we sold players like Willie Fernie to pay for the floodlights at Celtic Park. And these are guys we brought through, sold for big profits. Moved into the 60s, and it was like Paddy Crerand was the big name that left. There was a period when all the Lions were at their peak that we didn't sell any of them, which, fair play, I think Jock Stein had the measure of the board at that time. But then the Quality Street gang, all the big talents were sold or lost for other reasons. In the 80s, we've seen it again with the likes of Brian McClare. I know he never came through the ranks, and in the 90s with Collins, etc. But I think there was a lull, and the lull was due to the fact that we stopped producing so many players, and that lull was in the 90s. And one of the exceptions to that, I think, was Jerry Craney. So he comes through as a prolific goal scorer, and he continues to score goals for the first team. And then eventually we did sell him, but he was never really a fan's favourite for some strange reason. But when you look back, his record was phenomenal. He's now actually up at St Johnstone. He's part of the youth set-up up at St Johnstone, having qualified as either an accountant or a solicitor, whilst driving taxis, and he's now back in the game up at St Johnstone. So fair play. I was a big fan of Jerry Craney as a wee guy, yeah, because I think purely for the fact that even though my sort of knowledge of football and the game and everything like that, I wouldn't say it's any remarkably improved from when I was like 11, 12 years old. But like, I think it was just the fact that it was a Scottish guy playing for Celtic. You know, it was a guy who, I mean, I don't know if I remember reading anything about him being a big Celtic fan, but I had him as a Celtic fan, and he kind of looked like a Celtic fan, if you know what I mean. Like, he just looked like somebody that could be on the terraces next to you, but he just happened to be wearing a strip. And I guess similar with Kieran Tierney of recent years, he kind of looked like he could be one of those wee guys just cutting about with the bum bags over the shoulder and the Gucci bum bag and and all of that. But by the way, see when you mentioned about the gum shield and the sponsor, can you remember Henrik Larsson's headband?
Was that an Umbro one?
No, it was Ramlosa. It was a Swedish mineral
Your
water.
memory is absolutely astonishing. Was that a sponsorship deal? Was that right?
I have no idea. I don't know the story behind it, but it was Ramlosa, and I looked into it at one point because I was I wanted to get one just because it was Henrik Larsson, and I probably would have got anything that he wore or sported. So. Yeah. Superb.
No, the reason I bring up Jerry Craney is because obviously I'm a bit of a 90s kid in terms of football and music, and I'm always interested in these links. So I've managed to link Reo Hatate to Jerry Craney. So anybody out there wondering what on earth we're doing here, this is what happens when JP and I are on Axon. We go on wee tangents from time to time. Let's get a few of your comments in. So Esteban Caracas. Have I said that wrong? Probably. Hail, hail. COVID CSC for me. So get to listen live for a change. Well, I hope you get better soon. Esteban Caracas. There you go. I've done it better justice there. I hope you get better soon if you are suffering from COVID, and you can tune in every day at 12:30 for us, and also half an hour before every game, and we'll be live as well. Either me, myself, or some of the other troops will be involved. Here's the thing, for the game against Norwich on Saturday, JP, we're going to be collaborating with Celts Down Under. Our friend Jared Hill will be go live on their Twitter and live on our YouTube at the same time, simultaneously, because that means the same thing. And Lawrence will be joining them, and that will be the usual match day exploits, where I'm sure neither of the boys have been caught up in the recent Twitter shenanigans.
What time will that be in Australia for Jared?
That is a good point, actually. That is a very good point. He might be sitting there in his dressing gown for all I know.
I do love the fact that people are so dedicated. Well, I've been there myself when I've been in America on tour or whatever, and just going to find CSCs at 7 a.m. and stuff like that. It's just it's a fascinating world when you walk into like the back room of a closed bar and there's like 10 guys sitting just huddled around a TV with like a pool table covered in scarves, and they kind of give you a look as if to say, who the hell are you? And I was like, all right, I'm for Glasgow. And they're like, oh my God. And I showed them a season ticket and stuff, and they were amazed that someone had just wandered into their supporters club actually from Glasgow.
I usually get, it's JP. That's what I normally get. So I don't know if you get PJ. I remember that actually years ago, being in New York and going to the parlour. And on my way there, because it was at a bizarre time to watch the game live, it was the first time Lenny was in charge. It was a European game. I think it was Braga. Remember the Punters? I'm sure it was that game. And, walking up to that, and it's a completely different experience. But actually thinking to myself that the Celts over in New York, this is their normal kind of day-to-day match day experience. So I'm like yourself. I enjoyed it. I really did. I'm going to be bringing up a couple of these points because they're part of the discussion we're going to have anyway. In Ange we trust, says Stefan Halley. And I could probably relate this to maybe, I think it was Monday or Tuesday's bullet. It would have been Monday. I was on my calling on Monday, JP, and it was at that point we were just about over the line with Aaron Moy and also Maurice Gents. And we were talking about Moy specifically. And there was this, because we do gauge opinion on social media, we know it's not a perfect gauge. I personally hope it's not a perfect gauge, but we do look at that. And there was a lot of talk about it being an underwhelming signing, a signing where Celtic are doing it on the cheap, can't possibly be on the first choice target list, etc. But there was another school of thought where this is a shrewd buy. I mean, he's a player that Ange knows. There's attributes that he's got that both Rogic and Beaton have, and that we've lost since both those players have left the building. So it was almost like two ends of the scale, and we had that debate. So it was it underwhelming, or is it all about in Ange we trust? And I'm a wee bit sceptical about that attitude, because I'm not one of these ones that in the so-called 10 in a row season was just saying keep the faith, it'll all work out. You know, I don't think we had that kind of luxury on a Celtic State of Mind to have that attitude, JP. So as much as I respect Ange and absolutely admire what he's done in the transfer window, I would still look at every signing on each of their merits. But I was of the view, and you've not had a chance to speak about this, I was of the view that Moy was a shrewd signing. I wasn't underwhelmed by it, but I could understand that viewpoint. What was your reaction?
My reaction to any signing that we make now going forward is the same as I always used to say in the past. Like, we cannot be bringing players in that the manager doesn't want. This clearly is a signing that the manager wants. You're not going to try and tell me that the board have gazumped Ange to sign Aaron Moy on a free and he wanted somebody else, and it's going to come out in 5 years' time that Ange actually wanted to spend, I don't know, 10 million on some player and he didn't get the money, and it was, you know, I'm just not buying that at all, you know. It's sorry, something's just popped up in the middle of my screen there. It's right to be wary, I guess, of the board in the past, because we have been, you know, pretty bad with spending and bringing in players that haven't fitted the bill and have ended up leaving with little or no contribution. We've remarkably managed to get a few of them out the door this summer, and Marcas, Bolingoli, Sorrow, you know, the only one that's still there that has a huge question mark over his head is Hatate. But Moy, I don't know a lot about him. Obviously, I know that he's worked with Ange in the national team. I know that he's got previous experience in Scottish football. Some 10 years ago, I think it was, he was at St Mirren. Is that right?
Yeah.
His Premier League exploits, I couldn't even tell you. I wasn't paying attention to him at that time. But ultimately, I wasn't getting in a fluster about the fact that he was 31. Is he
31?
Yeah. But the fact that he was 31, you know, I think immediately people had like red flags because he was over the age of 30. I mean, we can't just start like sort of going, oh well, you know, he's over 30. Where's the signing policy gone? Sometimes you bring in players that are over the age of 30 and that aren't being bought to develop and sell on or whatever. That it's not always going to be a Jota or a Carter Vickers, or, you know, sometimes you bring players in that maybe are a bit unfancied. You look at the Strachan season, Strachan's time, bringing in people like Barry Robson, Paul Hartley. You know, I don't know if they're of a similar level or if Moy will be a lot better than them. But if Moy comes in and contributes in the dressing room as well as on the pitch, because obviously he's experienced and, you know, he can be a helpful guide to people like Matt O'Reilly, Reo Hatate. You know, there's invaluable experience there that can get tapped on. So it wasn't something that immediately made me go, oh God, why are we signing this guy? I think there was almost some hysterical reaction on Twitter to it, which, you know,
there was.
If Moy is on Twitter, I don't think he is, but if he was and he was reading some of the comments, I mean, some pretty snide stuff, you know, like just slagging his appearance. And, you know, I saw like a parody of him holding up the shirt where somebody had replaced his face or his head with somebody else. Obviously, that was a fan of another club, I think. But even within our own support, it was a bit kind of like, wow, like this is quite acerbic.
It was. And see, at the beginning of the pre-season, we were kind of looking at a review of where we were, what we needed to improve on in terms of the actual players. JP, I did a podcast with Colin, did one of the shows with Colin, and it was my view that we needed a goalkeeper, left back, centre half, centre mid, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Jota, plus a striker. And I remember looking at that thinking there's no way we're going to bring in 7 players, because if you totted that up, it would be 25 million plus. And we ran a couple of shows talking about are we prepared to pay this money? Will we get both signings over the line, the big ones, Jota and Kamikata Vickers? And so far, I'm looking at that and thinking, well, we're ticking all of these boxes that I personally felt we had to fulfil in this pre-season to strengthen the squad. And that's not me saying that Moy is only brought in as a squad player. At this moment in time, it's going to be difficult to get into that Celtic midfield in any position in that midfield. We're probably going to talk about players like David Turnbull, who, last season or at the end of that last season wouldn't have made my starting 11. But then what I've seen in pre-season would suggest that he himself is really staking a claim for a first team place. Then you're bringing in Moy, and you think, well, he's not a direct replacement for either Beaton or Rogic, so where is he going to play? And then you start looking at some of the footage of him over the years, and he definitely has defensive attributes. He breaks up play really, really well. He's got that pass that can split a defence wide open, and he can do it in such a way where I've seen him winning the ball and making the pass in one move. He can strike from distance. I think he brings a lot, and as you say, he brings a lot of experience to the table as well. So I definitely wasn't underwhelmed. But I just think, again, that people need to realise that people who were criticising the move need to realise that we can't bring in 7 marquee signings, JP, because Celtic aren't operating at that kind of level. We've gone out and signed, and we'll talk about all these players, but we've signed the left-back who may not be the first choice left-back, and there's been quite an investment in that. If we were to bring in a permanent centre-half, what kind of fee are we talking about there, over and above Kamikata Vickers? So we've played it safe, and we've brought someone in on loan who probably didn't have his best season last season. So that, for me, again, is just shrewd business. And I'm not that concerned about it. But yeah, some of the reaction I thought was over the top. Nothing like Celtic Twitter was last night. Overall, like I say, it's the first time we've been on the show together for a month. We've played 5 games. We have won 2 and drawn 3. And in the 3 that we've drawn, we've been ahead and we've thrown away the lead. I think the most frustrating one was last night, because we were so far ahead in that first half. We hit the woodwork 3 times, I think. There was a couple of shots went wide. Boruc saved a couple. We should have been more than 2 up. And then the second half was a different story. Do you just put this down to the changes in personnel, the amount of substitutions that's getting made?
Yeah, I think so. I think the team that started the game, if that's the team that finishes the game, give or take a couple of subs in the last 20 minutes or 15 minutes, I think we win that game, and, nobody, I didn't see anybody kind of bemoaning the fact that we didn't win last night, because ultimately it was another friendly. It was a good workout. I would have dearly liked to have been there, given the occasion for Boruc and the fact that it's in Poland as well. I have been to that ground to see a league game. I think I've spoken about this before, but the Legia fans behind the goal, like the Green Brigade basically of Legia, although they're white, they all wear white, and they just berate the rest of the stadium for the whole game. Because I was with a Polish girl and I said, well, what are they singing? And she just basically said, they're basically saying they're all scumbags or something like that, and pointing at us in this sort of south stand or whatever. And because they weren't supporting the team with as much fervour as the hardcore, the ultras, quite remarkable. But I did get that top, by the way. That is a Legia Warsaw top. I got that despite the whole friction between the clubs. I got it when I was in Warsaw on tour, and I like to get tops from places that I visit. I've got one from San Sebastian and Athens, stuff like that. That's why I've got so many football tops, bro. I just pick them up. But I think maybe last night went some way to healing the rift between the two.
I was going to ask about that, because I
didn't hear any needle.
No, well, I did raise that when the game was announced. On the one hand, you're thinking about Boruc and you think you want to be part of that occasion, and I want to talk about him. And then you think back to the European debacle, because it really was at that time. But then in the aftermath of that, finding out that there was a lot of kind of cyber attacks all coming from Warsaw to try and bring down Celtic's online shop and all this kind of stuff. And you just think to yourself, Boruc at the time came out and supported Legia, but I mean, what you expecting? And I did have that concern because I mentioned last night, if you go back to the 80s, that's me going even further back, mate, with your Jankowski and Dovcik connection at that point as well. So we had that Polish connection then. And then, you could maybe mention Zaraski and Boruc and was Paweł Brozek? He was Polish as well, am I right? Aye, and he came in on loan. And then that happened. So there was this, I'm not going to say it was like a massive friendship, like a St. Pauli thing, but there was links. There was links between the clubs. And then that happened and you thought, right, well, the friendship or the relationship is gone. But it did seem to go without a hitch last night. Now that jersey, I'm going to ask you the question because I spoke to someone who both designs jerseys and works for a football brand who manufactures jerseys. And he was talking about the change in crest, not of that particular club. He used the Juventus example and how they came out with a logo that could have been, you could see that on a van coming to your work. It could be just about anything. And the simplicity of it and how clubs are rebranding because they want to make the whole thing modern. And I'm looking at that badge, they've done exactly the same. It's simple, but I'm not sure I like it. I like the top, but I'm not sure I like the modern rebranding of club crests.
No, I know there's been a bit of a clamour for that online about trying to get Celtic to rebrand the Celtic badge. I wouldn't want that at all. I just think it would be strange to see anything but the shamrock. It's synonymous with the club. It would be. I mean, I guess there's an argument that you could redo the shamrock or do it in a different way, but I don't understand why anyone would want to alter the badge. Everything else has been rebranded in sort of football in terms and Celtic and stuff like that. So I think the one thing that stands alone is that badge that's been there through the good times and the bad, and to change it now would be a little bit odd. But I was telling my friend last night, actually, I have to say thanks to my mate Nathan for coming out and watching the game with myself and my pal Ian Shaw, who watches. Nathan won't watch this. He doesn't care about football at all. Never has, and never will. But he came and watched the game with us last night because we met up for dinner, and he came and watched the game. And I explained to him what happened with the whole Legia Warsaw fiasco. And as I was explaining it, I was like, do you know what? If that had been us, I mean, I would have been raging as well. Like, if it had been Celtic that had happened to, like, we'd horsed a team and then found out that we'd improperly registered a player and then got booted out of the competition. I just think the way they went about it, the whole let football win thing was a bit... They should have just... I think they should have just taken their medicine on it and been like, right, okay, we've made a mistake. We'll obviously never do that again because it's been costly. And then... I don't know. I just think the whole the giant banner that they put up at the ground of UEFA and Celtic and everything else was a bit much.
It's our fault. It was never Celtic's fault. I mean,
No.
Basically what brings to mind is that famous Ian Brown TV appearance where the sound gets cut off and he starts shouting amateurs. What football team at that level doesn't know how to properly register players? I mean, come on.
It was because the guy had been suspended, wasn't it?
Well,
he'd been suspended. He hadn't served a suspension or something like that.
That's right. And remember, Sion did the same.
Yeah.
So we've been lucky twice, and hopefully we're never.
But then we got beat off. We got beat off Maribor in the next round. That's the game. It's not infamous, isn't it? It's only infamous amongst people that know me and my friends. But I get caught on STV. In fact, not just STV, on Sky, everything, with my head in my hands. Just because I was watching the Maribor players celebrate, torturing myself, because I like to do that when we get beat. I like to watch the other players celebrating, because it makes, when you win, it makes it so much better when you do win. So I'm just sitting there in my seat. It looks like the stadium's empty, and I'm just sitting in my own. It's like that classic zoomed in on me, and then cue memes aplenty amongst my friends. I've been photoshopped in that image of me. I've been photoshopped into Jay-Z's swimming pool and Cheryl Cole's curtains. Oh, aye. quite a strange few days just getting these messages going off. There's another one.
JP, let's just say, right, those appearances are a lot less harmful than some of the appearances we've seen in the last 24 hours on Celtic Twitter.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're on the subject of Artur Boruc, and last night, I'm doing the game myself, so we started off talking about cult heroes, and I could talk about that for a whole show. Artur Boruc was a cult hero. Why was he a cult hero and not just perceived as a normal hero, great legend?
Why? I mean, the guy just was an absolute maverick. Like, I mean, I think somebody was saying, it may have been the 20-minute Tims, Melly was saying the 20-minute Tims that he'd never really seen, or not with Stephen, he'd never really seen a great keeper at Celtic until Boruc came along. There hadn't really been a keeper of, some repute at Celtic. I mean, no disrespect to the keepers that we had before him, guys like, I guess, Magnus Hedman, Rab Douglas, Javier Sanchez, Broto. They weren't guys that were, starring for, their country or pulling off world-class saves. I mean, Boruc did it all. If you look at his sort of achievements in his time at Celtic, he probably got us to the last 16 of the Champions League twice as well. The Man United penalty save and the Spartak Moscow game. I mean, for those two things alone, that's probably why he's kind of like deified. But then add in the Pope T-shirt at Ibrox. I mean, I remember being at Ibrox when I'm sure we got beat, but we'd already won the league, or we were going to win the league. And Boruc, I remember seeing him coming into the crowd, and I'm like, what's he doing? And then, because obviously it's so steep at Ibrox, I couldn't see what he was doing. And then the next thing I saw him running away with the flag, the champions flag. I was like, no way is he doing that. Like, that is, in my memory, that's seared in my memory as being like one of my favourite moments. And it wasn't even a goal or a save or anything. It was just a get it up you. And everyone, excuse the sirens, everyone loves a player that's willing to, be a bit mischievous. And I think he was just on the right side of it. He didn't ever do anything that was wholly inflammatory. It was just, he was just a bit of a wind-up merchant. And I saw that there was a clip on Celtic TV that someone shared yesterday of him. I think they were like trying to put some sort of, it wasn't Kerry Keenan, but it was somebody, a Celtic, I don't know if it was a Celtic employee or somebody from a TV studio or whatever, but the players were all trying to like put her in an ice bath, and Boruc grabs the mic and is commentating on the whole episode, and he's just like running along behind with the mic, talking. It's somewhere out there on Twitter, you'll find it. But he's just a character, and I think I had an affinity with him because he was Polish as well. My grandfather was Polish, so there was that there as well. And he did have an explosive time at Celtic, and then to think that he got into the state that he did, he was definitely for a football player, he was a bit overweight at one point, and it kind of looked like his career was going to be over. But that was 12 years ago that he was at Celtic. He's continued to have a career beyond that, and he's played in Serie A, he's played in the Premier League, he's continued to play for Poland, and he's just hung up his boots at 42. Yeah, he's the same age as me, and he's still been playing right up until now. And it was interesting hearing him saying that he was kind of like relieved that it was over. I mean, he could have ended his career ages ago. I'm sure he's financially all right. He must have had a desire to keep playing. And he said he's looking forward to spending time with his family. But it was emotional seeing him when he pulled the jersey up over his head. You could see that it kind of probably hit him at that point that, this is my last time on the field. So maybe he was trying to play it down a bit, but he was definitely emotional. There's no doubt about it. But
definitely.
I loved him at Celtic. Absolutely loved him.
I did as well, and it's an interesting point you made there. From was it Nelly? Did you say Melly regarding the goalkeeper scenario? Because when I started watching Celtic, Pat Bonner's the goalie, And so watching Celtic from 87 to 95-ish, Pat Bonner was in goals. And as a young boy, I rated him. I thought he was a hero. And I'm remembering penalty saves in the 1990 World Cup. And then I'm starting to realise with hindsight that a lot of the stuff I loved him for was for Ireland rather than for Celtic. And, you know, a lot of people didn't rate him on crosses and all that. But, I mean, this is a goalie that you know, he's in the top 12 in terms of appearances for the club. A lot of people don't rate him, but you can't deny that what he did for Celtic was huge. But then after that, you've got this procession of keepers. So what would it have been? Gordon Marshall after him, probably Johnny Gould after him, and then you're moving into Martin O'Neill territory. We had a few in between, like Tony Warner and guys like that. But then Rab Douglas comes in. A lot of Celtic fans don't regard him as a great Celtic goalie. Magnus Hedman. So that's interesting that it takes until Strachan comes in. And remember, we signed him on loan initially. And the only reason we made it permanent, because we signed him on loan and then pretty quickly we made it permanent, it was because Arsenal were making like permanent bids to Legia Warsaw to take him to Arsenal at that stage. We bring him in, spends 5 years, big memories like the ones you've mentioned, probably throw in his goal against Dundee United and the celebration after he scored the goal, which was just tremendous, the proper jazz hands and all that going. So I loved him, but I felt that he left too soon. Yeah. When he actually left, and I don't know if there was issues. I know that, for example, Gordon Strachan tells a story about there was a mistake in the first half that he really wanted to berate him for at half time, but he couldn't find him in the dressing room because he's in a cubicle having a cigarette. So he's sitting smoking in the toilet, you know. So you love that because he's a personality. But going back to the thing you mentioned about age and Moy, you can never forget Lubo. You can never forget the impact of Lubo.
Now, I have to say, when Lubo signed, if there was such a thing as Twitter, I may have expressed concern at Lubomir Moravcik signing. I don't know if I would have quite gone full Hugh Keevins on him about it, but you know, that was at the time where, you know, us signing, I mean, Rangers were spending millions on, you know, proven internationals. They were bringing in guys like Arthur Newman and Giovanni Van Bronckhorst and the rest. We all know how they were able to do that. Obviously, I'm not talking about EBTs. I'm talking about a healthy overdraft, which was eventually called back. But Moravcik coming in at that time, I remember seeing it on teletext and being like, "What, 33-year-old Slovakian? Like, why?" I think there's a hell of a difference between where we are now. Same with like Boruc as well. I mean, if Boruc had played now in this Celtic team at the age that he was, I mean, that would have been pretty frightening. Same if he'd have been in Martin O'Neill's Celtic team as well. Like that would have been great. But he left. Boruc must have left when Tony Mowbray was the manager. Is that right?
Well, I can certainly never remember him playing for Mowbray. I don't know if it was in that. I'd need to check if it was maybe that pre-season.
If it was 12 years, then that's 2010. So 12 years since he was at Celtic. So it must have been in and around that time, maybe the January or something like that he left. I don't know. But and all the other thing about Boruc I loved is that he's obviously Legia Warsaw is his team, and that image or the footage of seeing him in with the ultras at Ibrox.
The loudspeaker, yeah.
Oh my God, did he not get rapped for missing training?
Yeah, that's right, because he was with Bournemouth at the time, wasn't he?
Would it have been Eddie Howe?
It would have been, aye.
It was Eddie Howe, aye, that's right, yeah. Aye, that, I mean, I know that they got beat and stuff, but just the fact that he was there was enough for me. Like the fact that he was in amongst them, and then you saw footage of him as well. Like I think it was at an away game or something where he'd climbed up and he had the megaphone at a Legia Warsaw away game, and he was leading the chants. It was, I mean, that's a one-off, and probably won't see anybody like him again. You know, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately, indeed. And he did rent his pad out in Glasgow to Lukas Jaluska. for a spell after he left Celtic as well. Some great comments coming in. Thanks everybody for getting involved. John Newlands is concerned about the drop-off. We spoke about that drop-off from first half to second half. These are supposed to be our depth proving they should be getting picked. The drop-off is frightening to me. There's this chat, and we had that discussion last night, JP, about us having a very strong 15 or 16. And then as soon as you get to maybe the third choice players that within their positions, there is a drop-off. And there's a few players I would probably throw into that category who we'll talk about. But I was concerned for a spell last season where we seemed to be able to play for 50 or 60 minutes and then there was a drop-off. And often, though, we had already won the game by that stage. And we talked about it quite a bit on Axom. So, if you were getting the results, you weren't all that bothered about it. And then we've spoken about the fact that the majority of the squad will have came up to the kind of levels and the tempo that Ange expects. The new additions obviously might take a wee while longer. But John Newlands is concerned about it. I'm going to also bring up Cathal Griffin, enjoying my last few days in Portugal. Hopefully you're getting the sunshine. Looking forward to today's Axom chat. Well, thanks everybody for getting involved in the chat. Here's an interesting one because... Also, before I go on the Boruc one, so the pictures of him embracing Stevie Woods and Josip Juranovic, I think it tells two different stories. So the Stevie Woods one, let's all just agree that Barkas was an anomaly, right? Because Stevie Woods' career at Celtic, and I know he was thrown in with the Neil Lennon, John Kennedy, Gavin Strachan thing. He was eventually, but I think his career at Celtic's been tremendous. The goalkeepers he's worked with, JP, has been phenomenal. And you could see, again, like you were saying, how emotional Boruc was with the jersey up against his face when Woodsy was cuddling him. It was a great image.
Aye, well, Stevie Woods has done well to recover from that 7-1 that we gave them at Fir Park on a Sunday night.
Was Henrik Larsson wearing the headband?
It was, and he scored 4. Mm-hmm. I think he scored 4.
And did he set up 2 or 3, I think?
Aye, there's one of the goals in that game, I think it might be for his hat-trick, is when the ball gets played. I think Jackie McNamara plays it over his shoulder and he just hits it. He just kind of lets it touch off his foot and it goes into the bottom corner. That was what a night.
By the way, there's another one, JP, another one of his goals that night that it was, if you watch it, it was Paul Lambert at his absolute best for Celtic. The way that he turned defence into attack. I mean, the goals are obviously on YouTube, but it was a through ball. And a lot of people I don't know if they've seen that in Lambert's game that often, but when you watch that, the way that he just completely changed, turned the whole game on its head, it might have been the opener actually, and it was slotted away. Superb, great memories. But Stevie Woods, what? You've got the 90 minutes?
I've got the full game on VHS. I got my mate to tape it. Well, I was at the game and I got my mate to tape it, and I would never I need to put it on the DVD, I think, just to...
Bring it in here, we've got all the stuff set up. Just get it in here.
You've got the stuff to do it, aye?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I got that. With all the old adverts as well, which is pretty mental, seeing the 90s adverts. But, Stevie Woods is... I mean, you've got to think that Barkas is the outlier in the Stevie Woods kind of role of honour, because everybody seems to have great things to say about him, and you see Boruc obviously embracing him at the end. He wasn't doing that for show, he was doing it because Stevie Woods is probably as well as being a professional football coach, was probably like a good mate to him as well. Like, because they would have spent a lot of time together, wouldn't they? Like, in terms of just one-on-ones and stuff like that. So he's obviously, and I think Boruc at that time was a bit of a firebrand as well. So I mean, his personal life was wild. Like, he actually said in that interview with the guy for Celtic TV, he said he sort of smirked and he said, "Yeah, the 5 years was great it was great on the pitch, and he laughed and he went, it was great off the pitch as well, So he obviously enjoyed himself in Glasgow. But yeah, it was good to see that at the end with Stevie Woods.
It was excellent, and I loved the Juranovic picture as well. The reason I'm bringing this one up, I was reading with interest some reports that Leicester City, we've mentioned Eddie Howe, so let's get it out there. Brendan Rodgers is interested in Matt O'Reilly. Doesn't surprise me. And I loved the way that Ange Postecoglou reacted to that when he was asked the question about it.
Oh, I've not heard.
So Ange Postecoglou was asked about the supposed interest in Matt O'Reilly by Leicester City, and he says that he loves that. Bring it on. He's not worried whatsoever. He says if clubs like that are interested in my players, it's because they're doing their job. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But it does beg the question. There was another point that came in earlier on. It does beg the question about us holding on to our best players, our star assets, JP, and we spoke about it when the story broke about Juranovic and the interest that he had from Atletico Madrid. That seems to have died a death, thankfully. And we had a show where we said that it was myself and Amy, we're going to go for the first time in 5 years without selling one of our star players. Do you think that is the case? Do you think the power of Ange is going to keep this squad together for now, at least?
The power of Ange and the Champions League. You know, why would anybody want to jump ship at this point, you know, without having a crack at the Champions League, getting to play? Every one of those players knows what Celtic Park's like on a midweek under the floodlights. I mean, you only need to look back at the Rangers game in February, you know, for a sample of what Celtic Park is like at night. Mm-hmm. And they'll have all been told by your Callum McGregors and your James Forrests, and well, God, you're running out of players that have probably played in the Champions League with Celtic at this point, because the number few, don't they? Like there's not really many left that can say, oh yeah, we played loads of Champions League games. So they'll have heard from them what it's like. And I just think, you know, if you're happy playing football, yes, money is important, but you know, I'm sure, I'm almost certain that in answer to your question, I don't think anybody will leave. I mean, I hope I'm not jinxing it by saying that, but you just get like a really good vibe about the dressing room and the camp, and yeah, I think everybody's looking forward to it. I think if we didn't have the Champions League guarantee, if we were negotiating qualifiers and we weren't to get there, I think maybe there would be a sale. If money was to be put on the table for a Juranovic or something like that, then obviously it may be a different kettle of fish. But I think there's a real harmony, and yeah, long may that continue. But I was thinking, just back to the Moy signing, we were linked last week with that Edouard Michou, you know, the guy from PSG.
Yeah,
and you know, I think that obviously caught everyone's attention, and everyone was like, oh wow, yeah, we should definitely get him. And I was maybe a bit the same, but then I started reading between the lines, and I spoke about this with Kev last week. Apparently that guy wants guaranteed first team football wherever he goes. How is he getting into that Celtic midfield? And who are you dropping? Do you know what I mean? So the difference is he's brought in Moy, who's probably not going to be sitting there going, oh, I want to play every week. I'll be happy to, play, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 games throughout the course of the season in order to rest the players, because there's going to be such a heavy schedule, and they've also, a lot of them will be away at the World Cup as well mid-season.
Yeah.
So, I think if you look at the obviously it was more fanciful or fancy to look at a PSG wonder kid, you know, but the reality is he comes in, he's not getting a game, I don't think, ahead of anybody in that midfield.
No, definitely not.
At 19, it might be, you know, that maybe fits into the whole model of buying a player and selling him on, but we don't really have room for that at the moment in the midfield. I don't think it's not an area of the park now that I think we need someone like that anyway. I mean, he looked good from the bits and bobs that I saw, and obviously coming from PSG, you know he's going to be of a certain level, but with Moy coming in as somebody that the manager knows, and I think somebody else said that it was between Fausto Vera and Moy, and he decided to go with Moy because he's worked with him. It was seemingly a no-brainer in terms of his communication skills as well, because obviously he speaks English. To bring in somebody like Vera, who's and it's quite an important area of the park, I would have thought, to like have somebody that can communicate and not struggle. So at least Bernabei has Taylor, you know, to work with on the left, and I think the midfield's absolutely fine now.
I agree with that. But you know what you were talking there about? Moy has worked with Ange. Ange has obviously worked with him on the training ground. He knows the type of makeup, the character and the personality that he possesses. And when people say in Ange we trust, then I don't think you can do anything but trust Ange in that scenario because he knows the guy so well, JP. It's not as though he's taking a punt on him. And I think we'll get a wee payment for him going to the World Cup as well. So there's a wee Brucey bonus as well. So nice one. I've got a few other questions to ask in relation to the fullbacks, which I'm going to come to in a second. But here's one from Jason Lee that I think is very interesting indeed. I think we're all seeing Starfelt's value in his absence. So there's a couple of things here. Obviously, Starfelt's been out. That was a massive part of last season's success, was that partnership there between, and I've said this before, not just between Cameron Carter-Vickers and Starfelt, but also between Joe Hart behind the two of them, and us having that solid kind of backbone of the team. And it's something that we didn't have in the final season under Neil Lennon. It's something that we didn't have under Tony Mowbray, and that's one of the reasons I feel that he failed. People used to slag off Caldwell and McManus. Well, that was a partnership that got us to 2 last 16s in the Champions League. First thing that Mowbray wants to do when he comes in is break that up. Scotland's Player of the Year and our captain, and he doesn't want to play them. Remember, McManus got loaned out to Middlesbrough and all that kind of stuff. So I think we do have that partnership. Now that Starfelt's out of the team, we've seen a wee bit more of Stephen Welsh. And Welsh, I don't think he's been an absolute standout. I think he's done himself no harm with his performances. But we've brought in a new centre-half as well. And it begs the question, where are we with centre-halves in relation to the other players that have played? So we've got Chris Julian, and we've got Boston Lawwell. And I was a wee bit surprised at the amount of stick Lawwell got a couple of weeks back when I was doing the match day stuff. In fact, I said this last night, it was against Blackburn. He didn't play great, but I'm kind of trying to judge him over all his performances. He's 19 years of age. So the question I'm going to pose to you, JP, what do we do with Julian and Lawwell? Or do we have to just sit tight at this moment in time because we need the cover? Because I'm looking at Lawwell, I'm thinking he needs to play, and I don't think fifth tier of the Scottish football pyramid is where he's going to develop. So do we loan him out? And then the second question in that is, what do we do with Julian?
I mean, the Julian thing is now, it's not quite a saga, but it's not far off it, is it? I mean, the fact, I said this last week, the fact that Ange Postecoglou was willing to let him go to Schalke says a lot, you know. I mean, it was to all intents and purposes, he was gone until, was it wage demands that it broke down on, or was it fitness, or?
Well, it was veering towards the personal terms, and I think when you read into it, it's probably the permanent deal at the end of the loan deal is where it fell down. So what was he being offered if he was to sign in year 2? Yeah, and I think that's where it's all fallen to pieces. But like you say, Ange was willing to let him go. The player wanted to go. Is there any coming back? The example that was used was Simunovic. You remember he was ready to sign for Torino. You've got a better memory than me, JP. Two of the moments that we loved Simunovic for was the Kenny Miller tackle and the goal against Aberdeen, right? The Billy McNeil goal, let's call it. Did they happen after the breakdown of the Torino move? I think so, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he came back and he made an impact, a positive impact at Celtic. And the question was, can Julian do the same?
I think he can. I think, I was a bit apprehensive on Saturday when he came on because I was wondering what sort of reaction he was going to get, because sometimes, you know, I know it was something as small as the Instagram story of him on the plane with the little eyeballs. That could be enough for some fans to be like, nah, get him out. And there probably is a lot of folk that think that way, but it certainly wasn't vented in any way. He got a good reception when he came on. He was cheered on at the pitch, so he's got, at least he still seems to have the faith of the fans, which again is something, if you lose that, then it is quite a steep climb to come back from that if you've not got the fans on board. But he seems to have that, so I don't know, it just depends if anybody comes in for him between now and the end of the window, which it's weird that we've done all this transfer business and we're not even in August. I know. It's so strange. It's not very Celtic to be sitting with players in the door and you know, not really worrying about players going out the door. So I think maybe with the bringing in Moritz Jens, if that's how you pronounce his name, I think bringing him in probably would suggest that Lawal will go out on loan somewhere, maybe to just get game time. Speaking of players on loan, have you seen quite a lot of positive noise about Scales at Aberdeen?
Yeah, because we've got a group chat with the Scottish Football Show on the State of Mind channel, and there's 3 Aberdeen fans in that group, and they are very positive about the performances of Scales. And so I think he's performing at centre half, left centre half. Am I right? And apparently he's done so well so far so good. So,
I know the opposition they've been playing haven't exactly been, they've been playing in like league cup games, right? Like against lower league opposition. But I think he probably just needed games. But I saw a guy, an Aberdeen fan, put on Twitter, just said, "Whatever Celtic want for Scales, give them it." So
that was on the same day that the banner came out. No more Celtic loans. Is that right?
No, I think that's an old picture. I think that's. I don't think that's. I don't. No, I think that's an old picture. I think that was maybe put up right at the time that they signed Scales.
Right.
I don't understand why would you bemoan the fact that you are getting players who do a job for you? Do you know what I mean?
And a very good job, Ryan Christie.
Exactly. Like it's a strange. I mean, obviously, it's a bit of a sore one when they didn't get to sign them permanently. But I mean, we've been in that situation with players from other clubs loads of times where players have come in, like Craig Bellamy, for example. Remember, he came in, did really well. And there's a host of others that we've not been able to either sign or afford. Robbie Keane would have been great to get Robbie Keane permanently, but we didn't. I think Lawal would benefit probably because he'll be quite far down the pecking order now. You would have thought, because Jens coming in definitely pushes him further down, doesn't it? Because you've got Stephen Welsh, potentially Julien. I think the Julien factor will play a big part in what happens with Lawal probably. Because if he goes, then he might be kept on.
Well, I think so. And that question mark around Julien, I think we have now gone 2 pre-seasons with that question mark. So if we go back to last season, we signed Cameron Carter-Vickers on the last day of the window, you'll remember. And I don't think we were planning to do that. I really don't think we were planning to, because you would have expected at that stage for Julien to have been far ahead of where he was in terms of coming back to the first team. And I'm not saying it was a panic buy, and it worked out absolutely tremendously for us because Carter-Vickers has been a revelation. But it was based on this question mark around Julien. So we bring in a loan deal last day of the transfer window. And then again this time, we're not committing to a full-time permanent deal on Gents. I don't know if that was an option, but we're not committing to it. Because again, we've still got this player who is an asset, who we almost sold, and there's still a question mark around him. So we bring in another loan for centre half, and also we don't really know what to do with Lawal yet because we don't know if Julien's sticking around. So that question mark around Julien's been hanging around now for a whole year, over 3 different transfer windows.
I think it's just been unfortunate because of the length of time he was out. He was out during a time which was obviously a weird time in the world, but he was out in a time where there was so much turmoil at the club, and then he comes back to be a player again when there's a brand new regime, loads of new players, and he's trying to get into a settled side. Because, I mean, when did Julien actually declare his fitness? It wasn't at the start of last summer. He wasn't. He surely wasn't still fit at that point because obviously we signed Carter-Vickers on loan. But so once Carter-Vickers and Starfelt established that partnership, how could Julien possibly be banging on the door going, "Oh, I want to play," or "I should be playing"? Well, you can't, because these guys have got the jerseys. So it's just been unfortunate for him, I think. And then obviously it's got to the end of the season, and he's probably had a conversation with the manager who's said, "These 2 guys are my first choice centre halves. They've won me 2 trophies, and I can rely on them, and I can rely on them in the trenches almost. They've been to Ross County away and got 3 points. They've been to Aberdeen away and got 3 points. They've been to Ibrox and got 3 points. despite being supposedly maligned, Starfelt's played in all those games, and played well. There's still people that don't like him, and everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I just can't. I think people have just dug their heels in on him, and they can't sort of, backtrack.
Well, for me, he's still the first choice. He's still the first choice when he comes back, and Gents has to prove himself to get that jersey. The other thing I was going to say, actually, when we're going back to the age discussion around Moy, and we spoke about Lubo, there's been a few others. I mean, remember Sinclair, there was, he was 29. You hadn't been playing on a regular basis when he comes in, and certainly for 18 months he was superb for Celtic. And even last season, Joe Hart comes in again, after a fairly poor kind of experience at Spurs, and you look at his age, but I mean, it's been absolutely no barrier. So I am pretty positive about all the signings at this moment in time, although I would say at this moment that Taylor's still my first choice left back, but again, that's up for debate as we move through more pre-season games. Thanks to Greg McVeigh, who's come in and says that he loves the solo shows because there's a lot more audience participation. 100% there is, because otherwise I might run out of things to say, Greg. So I'll bring up a lot more of the comments when I'm on solo. I won't be solo this Saturday, but thanks everybody for getting involved. And I've got to say once again, JP, really enjoyed that first show we've done in a month together. Thank you very much for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.